Despite the long history that One Piece has, it just doesn't have the same pedigree of video games that other animes like Dragon Ball Z and Naruto have. I mean, yeah, there's some fighting games, but they aren't on the same level of Ultimate Ninja Storm or really any of the Budokai games. One Piece just wasn't blessed like that. Which is unfortunate considering that it has the kind of story that could really lend well to fantastic video games of many different genres, and not this. It just really makes you wish that, what if they could just make a Game Boy Advance adventure platforming game with really fun and amazing sprite work? Wouldn't that be something? NANI? Remember last week when I talked about the amazing low-key Dragon Ball Game Boy Advance game that was probably one of the most fun platformers I've ever played? Well, what if I told you that the same developer of that game, Dims, just copy and pasted that Dragon Ball game, but made it One Piece? And is surprisingly considered to be one of the best games in the One Piece franchise. How did this somehow miss my radar? I mean, I don't even remember ever seeing this game back at GameStop or anything. Whatever, my name is Josue, welcome to the Panic Brothers channel, and let's talk about One Piece for the Game Boy Advance. Now, One Piece for the Game Boy Advance, despite being made by a Japanese corporation, surprisingly only ever released in America. I can only imagine that this game was made to coincide with the 4Kids adaptation at the time, as on top of using the 4Kids naming conventions like Zolo instead of Zoro, I hate the name Zolo. It only adapts the East Blue saga of One Piece, which was all the 4Kids anime caught up to by 2005 when this game dropped. Releasing this specific video game in Japan in 2005 would be kind of weird considering the anime in Japan was already up to Water 7. The game features 6 levels that cover each of the major arcs in East Blue, including Romance Dawn, Orange Town, Syrup Village, the Baratier, Arlong Park, and the game caps off with Logue Town. Each level follows a pretty standard convention. It's a 3-act structure, with the first act primarily being an exploration stage where you end it by reaching the Jolly Roger flag. The second act is a hybrid between some exploration and mini-bosses, and the third act is a boss fight with the main baddie of the arc like Buggy or Don Krieg. The story is extremely abridged. Character interactions happen a lot faster than they typically did in the manga, although it is a Game Boy Advance game, so stuff like that is pretty standard for these kind of games. And as per the manga, you'll have different members of the original 5 Straw Hats join at the end of their respective levels, like Zoro at the end of Romance Dawn, or Usopp at the end of the Syrup Village level. They don't really join your party though in the conventional sense. Once they join your crew, you have to actively seek them out throughout the level to get them to join you. You don't play as them or anything, they just specifically give you a special technique or two that you can use in battle that uses up your power bar. If there's one thing that this game deserves a ton of praise for, it's the sprite work. Characters are so expressive and look so accurate to the anime. Luffy looks so good whenever he does literally anything. I wouldn't really expect anything less from the same people that gave us Advanced Adventure, which I also kind of consider to be one of the most beautiful looking games in the Game Boy Advance. However, despite what is pretty much the same exact skeleton as Advanced Adventure, there are some pretty key differences that make this game feel like it was especially rushed for a proper release. This game was released in a time when video games were released on every single console imaginable. PlayStation 2 games for some reason also needed a Game Boy Advance version as well. Except of course, PlayStation 2 video games were completely different beasts compared to what the Game Boy Advance would be able to handle. So what do you do for the Game Boy Advance version? You make a completely different game and you give it the same box art and title. That's literally the same song and dance that happened with this GBA game. One Piece Grand Battle is releasing in America on September 6, 2005 on both PlayStation 2 and GameCube. However, there was no version of the game releasing on Game Boy Advance. So what do? You call up Dimps, who uses a previous game, shake up the models a little bit, and bam, you have a One Piece video game on Game Boy Advance to coincide with the release of Grand Battle. And look at that, they even have the same box art. Advanced Adventure was this amazing adventure game that took you with Goku along every single step of his original Dragon Ball adventures and even threw in what I consider to be the best 1v1 fighting mode on the Game Boy Advance. It was a complete love letter to the series in every single regard. Not to mention that Dimps was definitely very familiar with the Dragon Ball Z franchise by this point, already having developed Budokai 1 and 2 with 3 on the way. One Piece, despite using a lot of the same framework as Advanced Adventure, just doesn't really feel like it was given that same love and attention. It's weird for me to say that since, by all means, this is very much so still a very solid anime video game on the Game Boy Advance. It plays well, it's absolutely beautiful, and it adapts many of the crucial moments from the series and runs properly. Fighting isn't half bad, and there's definitely a bunch of little Easter eggs along the way. But you can just tell that there are some things off in the gameplay sense. There is barely any variation in enemy types. It's either a pirate with a sword, or a pirate with a gun, or a pirate with knives. The mini-bosses, while they look nice, just seem to be thrown in there as fan service as opposed to an actual proper fight. Like I beated this one dude with just one punch. My biggest gripe, however, and I'm not sure if others have had this experience or not, is that the game is hard. And I don't mean that in the sense that I just suck at video games or something. I mean, you will just have these levels that can take anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes long, and little things just happen to you that could ruin you. Maybe a bomb that you didn't see just explodes and you roll down a hill with no way of getting back up, and then you fall into a bottomless pit. Or maybe you go on and on and on and there's just no health items for you to restore your HP, leaving you completely helpless once you make it to a boss. And then there's Buggy. Buggy. I legitimately can't get past Buggy. I don't know how, it's buggy, and I'm somehow having the hardest time ever. Also, the music can just absolutely be grating to listen to. I have yet to really find a track in this game that I consider to be a bop, or at the very least passable. There are these treasure chests scattered throughout levels that require a key, yet you can't actually open them at all unless you restart the level way later on after you receive a collectible. The game has a collectibles mode which you can pick up that references different stuff from the series, but they pretty much do nothing at all. Like, they're just stuff that you look at. I honestly and sincerely do think that this game is a pretty fun pickup for One Piece enthusiasts, especially considering the pretty low quality overall of One Piece video games. The game is still good for the most part for what it is, an anime tie-in game on a portable console in 2005. But it just could have been so much better knowing what we just had before. Imagine if we got to play as the other Straw Hats as well. Or what if they adapted that 1v1 fighting mode from Advanced Adventure into here as well? I mean, it's the same engine, so why not, right? I always wanted to try out this game ever since I first heard of it, since it's the only One Piece video game of its kind and the only one developed by Dimps. But after putting about an hour or so into it, I think I'm ready to move on to the next game. You get a feel for what the entire game has to offer you very soon, and unless you play it in short bursts every once in a while, it can start to feel pretty repetitive very fast. Although that short burst aspect of the game makes sense considering it was originally meant for a portable console. But please tell me, did you play this game? Did you enjoy it? Did you grow up on it? Let me know in the comments, and I also kind of want to eventually get to other One Piece video games in the future, so please give me any suggestions that you have in the comments. Until then, my name is Josue, and I'll catch y'all later.